Welcome to CSIS Online. The way we bring you events is changing, but we'll still present live analysis and award-winning digital media from our Dracopolis Ideas Lab. All on your time, live or on demand. This is CSIS Online.
Good evening and good morning to those of you in Asia. I'm Dan Rundy, Senior Vice President at the Center for Strategic International Studies and Director of the Project on Prosperity and Development. I'd like to thank all of you for joining today's virtual event discussing future opportunities for development cooperation between the United States and Laos. We have an exciting group of speakers joining us today from Laos and the U.S. Laos, a country with a population of 7 million people, is a growing area of interest for development partners. Despite being the only landlocked country in Southeast Asia, Laos has made significant improvements in economic growth and poverty reduction over the last 2 decades. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, it had a tremendous economic growth rate of 7% a year and slashed its poverty rate from 46% to 18% in 25 years. That is amazing. The Lao government has taken steps to open its economy to foreign trade and investment, and there have been advances in its tourism, education, and health systems. Laos is also a frontier for stronger U.S. relations with Southeast Asia. Relations between the U.S. and Laos were strained for decades because of the legacy of the Vietnam War. However, this changed in 2016 when President Barack Obama became the first sitting president to visit Laos, and the U.S. Lao PDR comprehensive partnership was signed, which created a new cooperative plan for U.S. involvement in Southeast Asia and Laos. Since this agreement in 2016, the U.S. and Laos have worked bilaterally in areas including economic relations, the environment, health, and governance. Since Laos released its newest 5-year economic and social development plan in 2021, and announced its goal to graduate least development country status by 2026, there is an immediate interest in working with the United States to achieve these development goals. Over the past 6 months, CSIS, in partnership with USAID and the Embassy in Laos, has been convening a high-level working group, held roundtable discussions, and written 4 policy briefs detailing what the future of development cooperation looks like between the United States and Laos. These research endeavors have successfully identified 4 general development areas that the United States can collaborate on with Laos. First, the U.S. can contribute to the Lao healthcare system by aiding the government's COVID-19 vaccination campaign. COVID-19 exposed many weaknesses in the health system, and there are many opportunities to extend health initiatives on inoculations, battle malnutrition, and buttress the health system. Second, fostering economic recovery post-COVID-19 will require the Lao government to simplify bureaucratic regulations and implement debt relief mechanisms for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, MSMEs, to grow. Now is an opportunity to integrate economic recovery into sustainable growth post-COVID-19. Third, digitalizing Laos is crucial to improving government transparency, supporting business growth, and investing in human capital. USAID's digital strategy will be an important outline to incorporate digital tools into Laos society and prepare Laos for a more high-tech future. Finally, there are a few strategic sectors that will propel Laos's economic growth. These sectors are renewable energy, agriculture, and the MSME sector. To ensure sustainable and inclusive growth in these sectors, development partners should help Laos diversify energy sources and expand renewable technology, as well as strengthen supply chains and demand in the agricultural industry and MSMEs. This has been a tremendous project over the last several months. I would encourage our audience to read the policy briefs that we have published at csis.org. If you have questions during our event, please go to the event page and submit your questions there. In the meantime, I'm really pleased to introduce our speakers for today's event to talk about the future of U.S. Lao relations and development cooperation. I'd first like to welcome Ambassador Peter Haymond, the U.S. Ambassador to Laos, for a conversation on the future of U.S. Lao relations. Following that, I'm really pleased to welcome our expert panelists to analyze the challenges and opportunities of development cooperation in Laos. We have Mr. Michael Ronning, USA Country Representative to Laos. We have Courtney Weatherby, Research Analyst and Deputy Director for Energy, Water, and Sustainability for Southeast Asia with the Stimson Center. We have Todd Wassel, who serves as the Country Representative for Laos with the Asia Foundation. And we have Ms. Sonomi Tanaka, Country Director for the Lao Resident Mission with the Asian Development Bank. But Ambassador, let me start with you. Thank you for joining us today.
Dan, great to see you again, and good evening to everybody watching from the States. Good morning to my colleagues and panelists here in Vientiane. Just want to say very briefly that one, we appreciate CSIS's efforts over these past 6 months to put together something concrete. I was saying to Dan a minute ago about U.S. Lao relations. This is a little country, but seated in a key region as a member of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, as one of the countries in the Mekong subregion, a major factor in control and management of the Mekong River watershed. As Dan also mentioned, the U.S. and Laos have a challenging history dating from the Vietnam War and then into the Cold War. Laos remains one of the 5 communist countries in the world. As with most of the other communist countries, we'll leave North Korea out of this. Laos has moved to the market to sustain its economy, following closely after the pattern of its longtime partner, Vietnam. The big shift was mentioned in the relationship here really got going with the visit of President Obama in 2016. At that time, one of the key agreements was to officially establish an aid office. There'd been an aid person, a contractor here for a couple of years after a 35-year complete absence of aid from Laos. And since 2016 and up to present, the aid budget and activities in Laos have roughly quintupled, bringing us closer, was saying a moment ago at opening with Dan, to the normal relationship, a normalization of the relationship, in this case, one would expect between a small developing country and the United States trying to help a partner advance. My 2-year tenure here has been overshadowed by the COVID pandemic, as elsewhere in the world. That has hampered, though not stopped, some of our programs, but it's also offered new opportunities to demonstrate what comprehensive partnership means from the United States point of view. That is, helping partners in crisis. And we're proud to be approaching $15 million in various types of COVID assistance, not counting several million doses of vaccines that have been provided. And another thing really is that the COVID crisis has highlighted past health cooperation between the U.S. and Laos, because while Laos has quite a weak health system compared to its neighbors, many of its strengths have been developed in close partnership with U.S. CDC and USAID over the past decade, and they're very aware of this and how this has helped them to come out of through COVID in relatively strong shape. Going forward, our efforts this year are to help the Lao start moving beyond the COVID period, to build back their economy. They had extremely rapid growth, as Dan mentioned, for a decade or so, a leader in ASEAN. They have already had challenges on the debt side and other economic aspects, sort of a hangover from that 10 years of rapid growth, even before COVID hit. They're taking a real economic pounding right now by the self-protective health measures they put in. They're aware of that. That's the sacrifice they've made at this time. We're looking to help them come back from that, building back better, if you will, in a Lao context here over the next couple of years. So again, appreciation to CSIS for the efforts over past months and for arranging today's panel, and look forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Ambassador. Certainly the visit by President Obama there's a before and after. How would you characterize the evolution of U.S. Lao relations in the last 15 or so years? I mean, you've served here 3 times, so you've seen the relationship evolved. And as I was saying earlier, if a man has met his moment, it's you. I mean, you speak Lao. You're a Lao hand, a legitimate Lao hand in the U.S. diplomatic corps. I mean, I'm so pleased to have someone with your expertise representing the United States in Laos right now at this moment. It seems like this is a pivotal moment. But how did we get to this pivotal moment?
How did we get there? Thanks very much, Dan. As you might suspect, Lao hands are not really plentiful within the Department of State, but it's been a pleasure to work here a couple of times. Next month, I celebrate 25 years since the beginning of my first assignment in Laos. When I first arrived back then, this is in the late 90s, we were working with the government on 3 things, and 2 of them were Vietnam War related: recovery of POW MIA, cleaning up of unexploded ordnance, of which there are many hundreds, many millions of tons probably around Laos, and then counter-narcotics, as Laos sits right next to the Golden Triangle and as an undergoverned border, with a state with undergoverned borders is a challenging time with transnational crime. That was it. That was the extent of the relationship. Since then, as a combination of factors, I think moving past both hot and cold wars, the U.S. greater emphasis on engagement with ASEAN at the same time that Laos became more engaged and integrated into ASEAN. It was one of the late becoming members. As Laos has grown a little more confident in its own economic growth over the past 10 years. And as these things together have helped the U.S. start to bring more of its diplomatic engagement tools into play, more assisting some private sector, though there's not a lot yet from the U.S. here. But the biggest single change in that time has been the re-engagement of USAID in Laos. USAID had a very large role in U.S. activities here during the war period, during the 60s, building infrastructure all over Laos. After the 35-year absence, began coming back since the comprehensive partnership has begun putting together a full portfolio of assistance in a variety of sectors in Laos, both sort of the building of human capital in the education and health sectors, and then the governance writ large, i.e. how to build an economy sustainably, how to attract investment and trade on positive terms. That's on the U.S. side. Our interest in engaging, which began with the Obama pivot and rebalance, went on through the Trump free and open Indo-Pacific strategy, now into the Biden Indo-Pacific strategy, a very consistent strain on the U.S. side of increased engagement. On the Laos side, gradually moving past the war, and very frankly looking to avoid complete or over-dependence on one partner, which is the growing economic might of China just to the north. Not even getting into intentions, just economic weight makes China a huge power here. And Laos is purposefully looking to other partners in ASEAN, in the region, Japan, Korea, Australia, to the EU, and to the US. Not that it's pushing away from China necessarily, it is looking to balance.
Great. So Vietnam, Thailand, and China are significant investors and trading partners for Laos. You mentioned this, Ambassador. How can the U.S. complement those investments? Where are the opportunities for the United States in this landscape?
Sure. Laos is a small country. It's a small mountainous country. We used to compare it to a little slice of Appalachia, not just Appalachia, a little slice of pre-interstate highway system, Appalachia, located in the middle of mainland Southeast Asia, because it basically exists as a mountain spine between Thailand and Vietnam. What that means is in past, it's been very difficult to move across and move things around, people and goods. That has changed over the past decade. The roads are improved. There's the new railway, many have read about, a high-speed railway that's connecting Vientiane to Kunming, and through the Thai rail system connecting down to the Gulf of Thailand. increased digital infrastructure, internet connectivity, which is really changing the mindset of the young Lao people. They're now connected into the outer world in a way that's never been true before. For the U.S. side, it's unlikely we're going to become a major dominant investor here. We're a long way away, and it's a small population and a small market. In terms of private sector engagement, we tend to look at companies that already have, U.S. companies that already have activities in Southeast Asia and are looking to expand, looking to open a branch, if you will, to bring services and goods to a new Lao middle class and a growing economy here. But I think the biggest impact we're going to have is in helping the Lao create the most favorable economic environment for themselves. On the government assistance side, that is working on helping them with their business environment. It's one of the projects that AID has to get their policies and laws in place to make it an attractive place to do business. Another project we have that's under our U.S. Department of Agriculture is to help Lao farmers both work on the quality, like commercial grading of their crops, and second, to identify and access markets more successfully in ways before. Learning about those markets, getting more digital information about those markets. And on the U.S. company side, bringing high quality U.S. Goods and services into Laos is going to be a positive for all concerned. I'd say the longer term impact is for U.S. companies to also bring in their standards for treatment of labor, treatment of the environment around their operations, and help the Lao, show the Lao, and then bring other investors here closer to those standards. And that's why we're proud to have the U.S. investors we have so far. To sum up then, biggest impact we can have is help the Lao create the best environment for trade and investment here, one that protects the health of their people and the health of their environment and is sustainable going forward, even as their big economy neighbors, and Thailand, Vietnam, and China are big in any view of Asia, are the ones with the most companies in place.
So neighboring Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam have had significant tourism activity, at least before the pandemic. Is tourism a growth sector for Laos, and why or why not?
Sure, tourism is definitely a big source of growth, and that's been probably the area that's taken the biggest hit during COVID for obvious reasons. It employs a lot of people, particularly young people in the services sector. It was helping build a cadre of English speakers, which Laos desperately needs both to function in ASEAN and to attract, will deal with more international trade and investment. Laos remains itself as the best forested, most forested area remaining in Southeast and mainland Southeast Asia. It's got a number of UNESCO World Heritage Sites. It's a longtime backpacker favorite, which has been moving upscale in the tourism area for some of its best known sites, whether they're Khmer area era, sort of Angkor Wat era sites down in the south, the old royal capital of Luang Prabang up in the north, the enigmatic plain of jars and the 2,000-year-old stone jars on that plain, or just the atmosphere in Laos. So tourism has been steadily growing in recent years, and with the improved infrastructure, new train, a new expressway to some of the best known sites, one would expect that to continue. Ecotourism was already growing, is going to continue to do so. And USAID has identified this as one of the major growth areas and is looking to, has already prepared what they call a green tourism plan, again, to help the Lao develop the standards, the policies to both encourage growth and to keep it safe and sustainable. One other point I'll add on, which the safe and sustainable reminded me, going back to what U.S. companies can help with, another major growth area will continue to be for Laos energy, hydro to start with, huge resources there. maintaining standards that keep their country sustainably growing is a challenge. But they also have solar and wind resources. And they have these resources to the extent that it's outstripping some of the markets they see around them. So they're looking to make a rapid shift into electric vehicles because they have the electricity and because they have to import all of the petroleum products. They're actually making a move into cryptocurrency right now. I'm not sure they're completely clear on everything that's involved in cryptocurrency, but they know it demands lots of power and they're hoping for revenue streams. This all begs again for assistance from from experts around the world who have experience in these areas to help the Lao get it right in policy terms. Then they have the resources to move forward.
So, Ambassador, the region has become very strategic to the United States in terms of our security, diplomacy, and commercial interests, the ASEAN region. If you look into the future, what do you say to young Americans who want to work in this region or want to join the Foreign Service and specialize in this region?
Sure. That's probably the easiest sell I'll ever make anywhere. This is the region, this is the dynamic heart of the growing world economy with a variety of countries. You know, you go from China to Brunei and East Timor of development levels, of different resource bases, of varied cultures. It's an area that's going to remain as an extremely important dynamic economic market and area for the U.S. to be engaged. Economic dynamism and importance also leads to political and geopolitical interests. And it's the fun place. I mean, I'm personally interested in development economics and how countries move up the chain of development. And what's always attracted me in Asia is, maybe it's the simplistic attraction, but this has been the positive story for close on to 50 years now, 60 years now, maybe since the Korean War. Every country, almost, get the North Korean exception, and occasionally Myanmar shooting themselves in several different feet. Every country has been making positive progress, not at the same pace, not with the same government background or everything else, but together it is the most dynamic region to be involved in. And for anybody who's interested in different cultures and different activities, there's a wealth here. But the key thing, if you're the ambitious young person who wants to get into diplomacy and building international relations, this is an area where U.S. focus is only going to continue. For the last 15 years, it's been an explicit policy of U.S. governments to focus more attention on the region for the reasons I mentioned. I don't see that changing.
Ambassador, let me just ask you one last question. If you look out over the next 15 or 20 years, what are you optimistic about in the U.S. Lao relations, and what are you optimistic about in terms of where you see Laos going? I mean, do you expect that they'll exit the lowest income country status?
I expect they do, and they're very determined to do that. I've been impressed at that how much attention rhetorically and in policy terms they're paying to that. Based on what I've seen over the past 20 some years, I expect more Lao engagement. I expect more Lao participation on a more equal basis within ASEAN. They're the smallest, they're the poorest current member, but their faster growth and better communication is helping bring them up to the level of their partners in a way that wasn't previously possible. And then the infrastructure improvements already and those that are on the drawing board, which we have the DFC for the US looking at some of the activities with particular companies, particular projects. Asian Development Bank and other banks are helping provide this. Laos is making itself into a logistics hub in mainland Southeast Asia. They're already advertising that you can get a container from the main port in Thailand to Guangzhou via the rail system in Thailand and Laos in 3 days versus, I don't know, a couple of weeks going around the Straits of Malacca and sailing up. That's just starting out. It will only continue. So I see, and we want to encourage Laos to further integrate itself into the ASEAN dynamic, even as it maintains strong economic ties with its big neighbor to the north, China. Our goal as the United States is to help Laos maintain itself or improve its standing as a sustainably prosperous country that maintains its political autonomy within ASEAN and that sees the United States as a reliable partner. That's our goal here, and it's an achievable goal.
I think it's a very, after spending 6 months partnering with you and with USAID, I 100% agree with you. Ambassador, thank you so much for those wonderful remarks. It's been really tremendous learning from you this evening. I'm now going to turn to our expert panel, but I want to thank you again, Ambassador, for this. This has just been really great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, and for all the work that CSIS is doing. And I also want to hear what the panel has to say. Let's
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So I'm going to turn now to the panelists that I introduced earlier in my remarks. Let me first turn to Michael Ronning. Michael, thanks for being here, and thanks for your partnership. How do you see USAID's programming in Laos evolving in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, it's hard to follow the ambassador on that front, because I think he articulated a lot of what we're trying to do here, and he's, by the way, a great partner for USAID here in helping us advance development objectives. I think we see from a development standpoint a really interesting, intriguing, and hopeful opportunity to deepen development partnership and cooperation with Laos over the coming years. As you laid out the history where we've come over the past 5 years, and as the ambassador talked about, we've really opened up some opportunities here. That being said, as your policy briefs and some of the discussions I've laid out, and otherwise, the country's been severely affected by the pandemic. And whether it's the impact on the economy, on education, and on I would call it the non health related issues, non-COVID health related issues that are affecting the health sector. So those challenges, and as the ambassador laid out, though, however, have created kind of a rethink, a reset, an opportunity to look at where development can go over the next few years. At the strategic level, we think there's a pretty interesting and hopeful strategic alignment, both here in country and with USAID and US government goals here and in the region. Here in the country, last year, the government completed their 9th National Social and Economic Development Plan. This plan prioritizes and was actually interestingly adjusted toward the end to address the emerging challenges of the pandemic. And I give the government a lot of credit here for adjusting to their circumstances and making sure they're addressing some of the key challenges that I mentioned earlier on that are affecting the economy and some of the social sector areas. The other thing, as you mentioned, they are very committed to achieving LDC graduation by 2026. That's their goal. And those goals very much are merged. On the US side, where we see the convergence happening there, is the US increased engagement in the region via the Indo-Pacific and ASEAN. But specifically within USAID, I think the vision that Administrator Power laid out in November in Georgetown really aligns well. Her vision for inclusive development and locally led development, all ultimately leading to more sustainable development, as the ambassador talked about, are very much where we see the national plans going here. I think one thing that was learned through the pandemic was, while there has been significant economic achievements and other achievements in development over the past 20 to 25 years, it's also exposed some of the shortcomings within that. Some of those who may have not had the opportunity to really engage in education in the economic opportunities. And that's where we see USAID Laos continuing to put its efforts and increasing efforts. So quickly, just from a sector specific area, health and helping the country achieve its vaccination goals this year is a top priority for us, as the ambassador said, and mitigating the COVID impact. Beyond that, in health, maternal child health and nutrition, you mentioned nutrition off the top. This country has long struggled with issues related to stunting and malnutrition, and we want to expand, and we are expanding significantly this year, our efforts in those areas across the country, and including infectious diseases. On the education front, we've worked long to bring the non-Lao speakers into the education system at the primary level, and we see that we need to help Laos in the education sector build back in their education. And so we'll be looking for ways in which to expand that support, particularly at the primary level in some of the rural areas, to make sure that those who have been most affected in the primary education get back in the fold. Economic development, of course, is huge, and the ambassador and you laid this out, and your papers lay this out. SME support, making sure that they have an opportunity to participate, but also exposing and creating an enabling environment for business, trade, and opportunities that can exist here. And as you mentioned earlier, tourism will be very, very important as a part of this, along with digitalization. The last thing I'll just mention is governance. We think that governance is very critical to really enabling all these other development sectors to be successful over the coming years. So we are working now to codify a new partnership with the National Assembly and the provincial assemblies here, and help them play their role in ensuring the development goals are achieved, but also in serving some of those communities that have been left out and getting access to justice, vulnerable communities, women, and others who need to have the opportunity to get the justice they deserve. And we have great partnerships with the government on that. But underpinning this is ensuring that women are a part of this, prioritizing women-led businesses, prioritizing girls within our development. Climate has to be an integrated part of our work across our portfolio, regardless of the sector in which we work in. Adaptation, mitigation of the impact of climate, as the ambassador laid out, this is a great place for natural resources. We need to help them protect that and take advantage of that, but in a sustainable way. And also partnership with the government, with the private sector. We need to build trust here. There is a history here. We can't deny that. It's a difficult history. But we feel there is an opportunity to build trust and a relationship here and to contribute to this government and this country's development to, in their own words, in Lao's own words, build back better. And we want to be a part of that. And I think we are moving in that direction. And indeed, the stuff that CSIS has done over the recent months is certainly getting our thinking going and helping us as we move forward.
Thanks, Michael. I want to move to Tanaka-san from the Asian Development Bank. I think the Asian Development Bank is one of the most important multilateral organizations in the world. I'm so pleased, Tanaka-san, that you're with us today. I know you're the country representative for the Asian Development Bank in Laos, so you're a very important partner along with AID in the United States. Thank you for being here. How can ADB work with USAID to maximize development impact in Laos? And what are some areas where the two institutions can collaborate over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, thank you, Dan, and hello, everyone. So, I think it would be good to start off by what ADB is focusing in this country and what are the modalities of operation here. So, a lot of areas that Ambassador Pete and also Michael have highlighted, the focus of operation in the country is also resonated by ADB's key operation. So, the major difference that we, so-called the multilateral development bank, we're a regional development bank here. And so the priority operation, the support to this country that we provide here is financing, which is a concessional lending. But it's quite concessional in a way that, it has a grace period and it's much better lending than compared to the market one. So we have this financial support to, major key sectors, including the infrastructure. As Ambassador Peter has already talked about, that we have played a major role in the past in terms of bringing in the connectivity. Our largest sector at the moment is urban water supply and the tourism as a sort of a whole, and small town infrastructure support. We're big in agriculture, natural resource, transport in the past, not necessarily these days, but particularly more focusing towards urban transport. We support the urban transport in Vientiane capital. Historically, education, health, education, we have been providing technical assistance to Tibet technical vocational education and higher education as well, and in particular looking at women and girls going into STEM areas and also non-traditional technical areas. And then finding jobs there, including the IT areas. Energy sector, we have a supported transmission line, public finance management, and so across the board of all sectors, we have been providing support to the country. Now, so lending is a major operation, but also we combine that together with the policy dialogue with the government. And towards the policy reforms, as well as assistance through the capacity building, technical assistance on the ground, and knowledge support. So, we see a great potential of working together with USAID, particularly looking at us providing a larger investment, but also bringing together the private sector and the public sector. Because we all have the operation, majority of our support will be with the government, but also we have a private sector operation that we can bring in, and we provide investment directly into the private sector. We provide also support for the PPP, private-public partnership, ecosystem support, advisory support, and we think that will be particularly important. So, looking at the complementarity of a USAID providing grants and technical capacity, bringing in the investment, larger investment that the ADB could potentially bring in, we see particularly 3 areas of the support working together will be important. Number 1, as mentioned earlier, economic governance. This is a key area. And as you can see, we as a regional development bank looking at it, particularly the IMF Article 4 mission has been completed on looking at where the health of the economy of this country stands now. There has been a huge impact economically, and particularly the issue of debt sustainability has been quite affected. So if we can look at these issues together, the U.S. is one of the partners in the country. Business environment improvement. ADB has been supporting this assessment called a provincial level of facilitation for investment and trade index, so what we call PROFIT. So this is more like a provincial level business ease of business index. We see that this country still has a lot of scope for improvement in terms of the business regulatory environment and more ease of a regulatory framework to invite more investment from outside. So that's another area that we could work together further. SME support, it's been already mentioned by Michael. And that's another area, and in particular focusing in this country, very active participation by women-led SMEs, but they do have particular obstacles in entering into business, and in particular at the startup. So these are the areas on the economic governance. And then we see using the landlocked condition and turning that around as more to advantage. So regional economic integration is a very important area. We talked about tourism already, which I wanted to highlight a little bit more. Also, we see the integrated regional development, particularly looking at the border towns support. So integrating investment and then technical support, skill support around that, looking at also the regional trade investment opportunities together. The third area is the human capital development, which is linked to the 2 other areas that I already mentioned, and particularly looking at the skills development for IT. Digital economy, we already talked about that. The regional health security is another area that ADB has been supporting. nutrition and food security in this country is key. So, I'd like to give one particular example of where everything come together and where we could particularly work together with the USAID is we are about to launch this new multi-donor financing facility called the Frontier Financing Partnership Facility. So what it means is to support the early startup, early generation of small, medium enterprises, along with the tourism or the light manufacturing, and we provide the support along with them. And this will also include agribusiness and the tourism, supply chain support, skills for the new entrants in the business, and also managing the business environment and looking at the policy environment. So comprehensive support, more the merrier, and it's also supporting both the public and the private sector together. And this will be a great opportunity for us to work together. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanaka-san. Thank you very much. Courtney Weatherby, thanks for being here. I'm so grateful. Laos has made significant investments in the energy sector, particularly in hydropower. How do you see the energy sector in Laos evolving?
Yeah, so I think the easiest way to talk about sort of the evolutions in Laos's energy sector is to first give a really brief snapshot of what defines the energy sector right now. So Laos has for many years, for decades even, focused on developing electricity, not for domestic use, but for export. It had plans to become the battery of Southeast Asia, to develop primarily hydropower inside Laos, given its mountainous terrain and significant potential to sell to growing markets in Vietnam and Thailand, and eventually further afield in ASEAN. So as of 2022, Laos has about 83 operational power projects with 11,000 megawatts of power. The vast majority, about 80% of that, comes from hydropower. Most of the rest comes from coal, and there's a minuscule amount, less than 1% of that comes from solar and from biomass. So, most of that power is for export. Laos currently has MOUs to export more than 10,000 megawatts of electricity to Thailand, at least 5,000 to Vietnam, at least 3,000 to Cambodia, and it has long-term interest and is trialing a small-scale power sale right now of electricity through Thailand, through Malaysia to Singapore. So this battery of Southeast Asia concept is still very much alive. At the same time, I think we're seeing many changes to the energy sector globally, and a lot of those are reflected inside Laos, and in some places compounded by the unique situation inside Laos. So Ambassador Heyman already mentioned earlier when he was talking about the importance of the energy sector, that one of the key challenges is management of excess electricity. The construction of new power projects inside Laos has significantly outstripped demand. So there's actually sort of a debt challenge related to commitments from the national utility to purchase electricity, which it doesn't have a market for. So there's sort of compounding losses there. So finding a new market has been a key challenge for Laos. Ambassador Heyman highlighted some of the changes that are being made to sort of stimulate electricity demand domestically. I think as we continue to see economic development, as we continue to see urbanization, industrialization, we will see sort of continued electricity demand use inside Laos. And at the same time, we see these long-term commitments to continue exporting power to neighboring countries. And so moving forward, looking at sort of the bigger picture for ASEAN and Laos and the role that energy trade and electricity trade play in that space, I think that the larger challenges are going to be diversifying the energy supply in light of the challenges that climate change and drought pose to hydropower production inside Laos, catching up on the renewable energy transition, and pursuing sort of both the physical infrastructure and sort of the regulatory infrastructure to effectively trade power as ASEAN becomes more integrated. So Laos, as I mentioned, about 80% of the power comes from hydroelectricity. Laos has been particularly impacted, as has Cambodia, which also has a lot of hydropower, by drought in recent years. We've seen 3 of the driest years in the Mekong River in the last 3 years. drought and sort of increasing intensity and severity of weather events is part of the climate change predictions for the region. And whenever there's drought, hydropower productivity drops. And you even see this on a yearly basis because of the monsoon climate. So you get, high power production during the wet season and low power production during the dry season. So moving forward, diversification of the energy system is going to be really key for Laos, as it wants to continue exporting electricity to neighbors. And a major part of that's the renewable energy transition. When you look at sort of the potential that Laos has, it's a sunny part of the world. There's pretty significant solar potential. There's also pretty significant wind potential inside Laos. So there's sort of some catch up that has to be done there. Southeast Asia broadly, and Laos in particular, has been a little slow to incorporate national targets for the deployment of these alternative renewable energy technologies. So, we've got a vast amount of hydropower. The sort of the pipeline of concrete projects for solar and wind is relatively slim on the ground, although that is starting to change. We're seeing investor interest come in for large scale wind and solar. So I think as we're starting to see sort of the global push towards renewables play out in Laos, there are a few key opportunities to really help Laos with this transition. One of these key opportunities is going to be sort of capacity building and investment in pilot projects and management training for the integration of variable renewable energy. Wind and solar operate very differently from dispatchable power like coal or hydropower, and that needs to be accounted for through changing some of the operational practices for the national utilities. It'll need to be addressed through improved weather forecasting, improved load demand forecasting, and especially given the importance of exports, it'll need to be improved through physical transmission upgrades to link the grid in Laos to neighboring countries, and also through the regulatory framework to support electricity trade for non-firm power generation. So the type of terms that we see for power purchase agreements, which Laos is used to pursuing for its traditional hydropower and coal projects, will have to be adjusted and updated to reflect the changing production type from solar and wind. So there's a lot that can be done in capacity building in this space. There's a lot that can be done to help modernize the grid. And I think that there's also obviously the physical investment in these new solar and wind projects, which we're starting to see come in. So I'm going to stop there, but I think that's sort of a quick overview of the big challenges that we see.
Thanks, Courtney. Todd, Laos has a very youthful population. About 60% of the country is under the age of 25. Where do you see some of the sectors that will be able to create the right economic opportunities for these young people?
Thanks, Dan, and thanks everybody here. It's nice to join you. I think, the Asia Foundation has been in Laos for quite a while, over 50 years, and I think kind of remarking on what everybody else has said here, it's been, on a slower growth trajectory than most of mainland Southeast Asia, but all of the interconnectivity, both regionally and internally, the increased population growth, now we're at 7 million, has all led to factors where Laos really is about to take advantage of its opportunities, right? Of course, we've slowed down a bit because of COVID, but getting it right now is going to be critically important for Laos in the next couple of decades. So as you said, it's a very youthful population. So you're either going to get a dramatic benefit in economic output from those young people, or it's going to be a drag on the economy because they're not fit for purpose or they don't have the proper education to move into the economy of the future. So just looking at, and building on some of the things that the ambassador said and Michael said, digitalization of the country and the economy is particularly important, right? So young people are well suited to adapting to this. So we're looking at e-commerce and fintech in particular, and how that is going to transform some of the kind of brick and mortar businesses that were still operating before the COVID pandemic into this new transition. Green economy, we've said it a couple different times, that transition into electric vehicles, the sustainable use of Laos' abundant agriculture, high value agriculture specifically, as we begin to see new markets open up and new trade routes and trading happen between Laos and its neighbors. But I think what we also have to remember is that at the forefront of any of this support, that women in particular and different ethnic groups have to be provided with additional support. The vast majority of micro enterprises here are run by women themselves. They face incredible challenges in terms of both registering their businesses formally. They tend to have a lower rate of formal registration. And they also have a tendency to have a lack of ICT skills, right? So before the pandemic, the Lao Bureau of Statistics did a survey, and it was 95% of Lao women business owners said that they had very low skills in anything in the digital economy space. And only 2% were actually even using any kind of digital methods in their businesses. Now, that was pre-pandemic, and we have a lot of opportunities. The world has changed in terms of how you access your customers, but it's clear that there's a skills gap that's going to have to be managed. The Asia Foundation also supports a lot of young women from ethnic groups to come into Laos, into Vientiane to study STEM technology at the university here. And what we also see is that there is a specific need for supporting young women in these new fields and actually providing them with opportunities. So while there's great opportunities for youth in general, I think we also need to be clear that there's been some structural disadvantages, and we need to make sure that any kind of support to them is helping to support women to also gain an equal footing.
So we've talked about the tourism sector. Could you talk a little bit about what the prospects for tourism are going to be for Laos and how that fits into the conversation we've just been having?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think Ambassador Heyman also said it. Laos has an incredible abundance of beautiful nature. It's a wildlife hotspot. There's tremendous and growing opportunities for ecotourism, and youth and young people are perfectly situated for feeding into this type of economic work. Before the pandemic happened, Laos was tracking at about 4.7 million people a year visiting on tourism visas. And there's nothing to say that we wouldn't expect that to continue to go up once the world kind of goes back to normal, quote unquote, and planes start coming back in. Internally, we have new highways connecting major tourism zones. We have the new train. And what is important, though, is that part of the appeal or the romanticism of Laos is that it is a bit of a slower pace, that it's not as overly industrialized as some of its neighbors, that there's still places where you can experience quiet time on the Mekong or some of the main tributaries. But critical to getting this right is valuing that nature correctly, right? And providing the proper governance structures that has an integrated planning around tourism sites, right? So as we begin to build out different types of energy storage or industrialization, how does that factor into protecting natural parks and tourism zones? And getting that right is going to be critical for unlocking Laos' potential. And the other area of growth, most of the tourists that come to Laos are actually, from the Asia Pacific region, particularly ASEAN, growing parts of East Asia, and very few, U.S. citizens. I think is one of the reasons why we have, a kind of a lack of expertise, and understanding as well. But this also provides a really great opportunity to capture some of those groups going to Thailand, going to Vietnam, to add on to their trip, to extend it for a few more days and experience what Laos has to offer. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Michael, before I go to some of the questions from the audience, I wanted to give you a chance. Did you want to respond to anything that was put on the table by any of your fellow panelists? You're on mute.
Okay. Yeah, very briefly. A theme that I think is so important from the ambassador to all four of us here is the importance of ensuring that development is inclusive. I think Todd said it really well about ethnic minorities and women, ensuring that they have the digital skills available to them, whether they are teachers or business owners or healthcare providers or people trying to support people with disabilities. Digital skills are very important. And I think Sonomi said it as well about private sector engagement. It's not just the government. The government is actually increasingly interested in talking to the private sector and working to unlock some of these opportunities for SMEs and women-led businesses as well. And we need to support them on both sides to achieve that. But in the end, it's about inclusive development. All of these pieces coming together that makes it a more inclusive, sustainable development for this country.
Great. Okay, I've got 3 questions from the audience. The first is from Radio Free Asia, and I'm going to just put these out on the table, and each of you can kind of take what you want to address. How will the U.S. help Laos to overcome environmental challenges alongside alongside development over the next 5 years? What kind of action plans or planning do you have for monitoring and caring for the environment? This is from Radio Free Asia. So I guess the question is balancing development and environmental protection. So that's the first one. The second question comes from Rupert Haw of Riverstone Consulting, who was one of our speakers at one of our roundtables. Thank you, Rupert. How can the U.S. encourage ASEAN to provide more assistance for infrastructure financing, e.g. sovereign or multilateral guarantees for infrastructure projects? So that's the second question. And the third is a question very close to my heart from Daniel Yanto of the University of Alabama. In what ways do we see Laos and U.S. universities, what kind of potential is there for future cooperation between Laos and U.S. universities? If we are interested in growth, can educational cooperation commitments be a way to ensure human development that grows along with urban development? So I think this is a wonderful question. So a question on U.S. university cooperation, balancing environmental and development goals, and then the role of how the U.S. can encourage ASEAN. I'm going to say how the U.S. can work with multilateral institutions like the Asian Development Bank or the World Bank, for that matter, to support more infrastructure financing, whether it's sovereign or multilateral guarantees for infrastructure projects. So, Courtney, can I start with you, please?
Sure, I'll chime in with some thoughts on the first question about sort of how to balance, environmental protection and infrastructure development in particular. Because when you're looking at sort of what's coming in Laos, what's in the pipeline in Laos, looking at infrastructure, large-scale infrastructure, whether that's projects like rails or roadways or projects like large-scale hydropower dams proposed on the mainstream of the Mekong, obviously can have very significant impacts not only on local communities in Laos, where to my knowledge hydropower dam construction is the largest driver of internal migration in Laos in recent years, to longer, broader impacts on environmental and ecological flows to the Mekong River or environmental corridors. So I think one of the key challenges and opportunities here is to improve access to data. Tools like the Mekong Infrastructure Tracker, which is supported by USAID, can help provide sort of a big picture of what's happening in the region. We now have a lot of satellite data. We have big data that can sort of be a part of this planning process where you can look beyond an individual project, although it's very important to ensure that environmental and social safeguards are met for individual projects, and look at the big picture and look at sort of the cumulative impacts across a variety of different projects. I think sort of strategic planning, looking not at one project at a time, but the multiple projects and stacking cumulative impacts from projects in the infrastructure sector, and strategically choosing which projects to move forward with can be particularly important. So within the energy sector, for instance, that might mean looking broadly at all of the options that Laos has on the table for power and considering whether you should pursue some of those investments in alternative renewable technologies versus building another dam, and think carefully about some of those strategic trade-offs. So we have the tools, we have the data to support those types of processes now.
Thank you. Tanaka-san, I'd welcome your thoughts about any of these 3 questions.
Right, so I think I'm expected to respond to the issue of how we can encourage the investment on infrastructure, whether it's U.S. or any other development partners. I think one thing is the investment itself, but in order to facilitate investments, we need to bring in the investors' confidence. So that means that I mentioned this point of economic governance, that particularly that the country is working very hard to gain the investors' confidence in terms of their debt management and debt transparency, because this is a key area that the government needs to work on. And I would, and number two, as I also said previously, it is about business environment. I think the deregulation of some of the business registration, the obstacles that will bring the economy into more informality is really not gaining the investors' confidence. So it will be crucial to do more enabling policy environment and economic governance area in order to attract more investment in infrastructure as a whole. And finally, I would say that working together as development financiers will be very, very important to support the country moving forward in developing more infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. Todd?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think on the environmental challenges moving forward, I mean, it's clear, you know, the shift to, there's a you know, the Lao government is committed towards a green economy, right? And starting to create a more sustainable use for its natural resources. It's clear, you know, the whole region is moving in this direction. The amount of solar that Vietnam has put on its roof over just the past year is amazing. Thailand is moving in that direction as well. And so all of these types of new technologies, ways to increase new economic models for Lao are going to be incredibly important to protecting the environment. So the past model of cutting down their valuable trees and selling them is gone. And so what does it need to be replaced by? And for me, the best way to monitor that is to empower local communities to do natural resource planning at their local level and help them to decide what's the true value of the resources in front of them. That's everything from protecting fish stocks to ecotourism, to reforesting land. Unless you have the buy-in from local people and the local villages, all the central upper level planning is not going to mean anything. So really doing the work to get down to the village level, supporting people's base needs, right? So whether it's health, economic, or food, and then helping to show new models for protecting those natural environments that are going to be critical for Lao moving forward. I wish I had a better response on Lao and U.S. universities. I'd love to spend more time at universities, but yeah, more cooperation, more exchanges of scholarship. Anytime you can increase the flow of people and understanding and put out more information, I mean, it's going to be in the benefit of both the U.S. to understand Lao better and also vice versa.
Yeah, I don't know how many folks from Laos go and study in mainland China, but I'm guessing it's, you know, I don't know. I'm guessing that number is higher than to the United States, though I do hope and expect that many people in Laos consider studying in places like Thailand or Japan or Singapore or Australia. But, you know, my preference is, to the extent folks study in places like Japan or the United States or Australia, when they grow up to become business leaders or civil society leaders or government leaders, their speed dial generally gravitates to those places where they studied. So my strong preference would be to have as many capable people in Laos study in Japan, Vietnam, or Japan, Australia, Singapore, the United States, South Korea, Taiwan, and then go back to Laos to help develop the country. So I think this is a really important topic, and so I'm quite interested. Michael, do you want to comment on any of the three questions? I'm hoping if you don't comment on the university one, I'm hoping someone else will also comment on it.
Yeah, happy to comment on the university one, actually, because one, this embassy, actually, our embassy here is very much focused on trying to expand opportunities for young people to study in the U.S. But from a USAID perspective, specifically, beyond just studying the U.S., we, and I didn't mention this off the top, I'm glad the question came up, is we actually just recently signed a new agreement with the National University of Laos just a few months ago, which is a very new and huge opportunity for us. It's an opportunity. It's partnering USAID with 4 universities, including the national university in the country. And this will be working with economic departments on capacity building, capacity assessments, for them to work with local organizations. This is a locally led initiative by the university to take this on. We are just helping them do that. But we see this not as one agreement with the national university and the university system here, but rather an opening to what we see as a growing partnership with the national university. The ambassador just traveled to Luang Prabang and was at the university there kicking off this project and meeting with students and talking about his experience in Laos and joining with the project that we're doing. So we see a huge opportunity here. We see a growing partnership, which we are now codified with the national university, that we would like to grow on or build on. On the environmental side of it, I think governance, both on infrastructure and environment, if I can tie those two questions a bit together, because I think governance is key to that. I think the enabling environment for energy and use of energy and governance of it, along with protecting the environment, is huge. And this is where USAID, I think, has a comparative advantage across the globe, to be frank. I think we have an opportunity here to work in helping the enabling environment for energy, for renewable energy, for things such as electric vehicles, but also for infrastructure, along with, as the ambassador mentioned, any opportunities that may emerge that we can support with the DFC in the US as well. I'll stop there.
Any other comments? Courtney, do you want to comment on this university question? Or Tanaka-san, do you want to comment on this university or training question? I know you represent the Asian Development Bank, but one of the things I most admire about Japan is that it's been a very long time partner in Southeast Asia. And one of the things it is focused on is being a reliable training and capacity building partner. So whether wearing your ADB hat or as a passport holder of the great country, Japan, I don't know if you wanted to comment on this issue of long-term training in universities, or Courtney, if you had comments about this university topic.
Well, I'll just chime in very briefly on the university topic, and I'll say I think there's a strong cohort of individual scholars in the United States who are very passionate about supporting studies and economic exchange, and educational exchanges with Laos. One of the challenges, and I think this is a space which can be improved upon, is sort of the extent to which Southeast Asia studies is integrated into the United States. And we talked earlier about sort of there's a lack of Lao experts or Lao hands in the United States, and to some degree that's reflective of a lack of academic programming that focuses on Southeast Asia. So I do think that given the dynamism, the economic dynamism of the region that we've all talked about, I think there's rising interest in Southeast Asia, and I do think that's an opportunity long term to establish more of those institutionalized academic connections, building on the base of individual experts who already focus a lot of work on Laos and Southeast Asia.
Tanaka-san?
So if I may, rather than wearing probably the Japanese hat, I think I would wear a hat as a recipient of a scholarship that was given as a high school exchange program student of American Field Service. So, any young age exposure to culture outside is extremely important. One of the driving, factors will be about, pop culture. I mean, so Japan manga really attracts the younger generation. I'm sorry that we are talking about the scholarship and what kind of studies you do, but certainly I think engaging young people's culture is something that's really crucial. That might be a good approach, and this is one of the things that Japan is really attractive to, for the scholarship from this country. So I'll just stop here. Okay.
Well, look, this has been great. Michael, do you want to make some final?
Just one thing, it slipped my mind as I was talking about it. Nutrition, maternal health is extremely important to our work here and is going to be hugely important over the next few years. We do have an ongoing partnership for nutrition research with the National Institute of Nutrition here that is partnering with Indiana University and Purdue University to enhance Laos's ability to understand and research nutrition issues here so that they can more effectively address them. I just wanted to mention that as well, because I think it's an important partnership we have in the U.S.
I think I see the ambassador's hand has been raised. Ambassador, do you want to come back in and just make a comment to this conversation?
Yes, thank you, Dan. And I'm representing our public affairs team, which is in charge of educational exchange programs broadly. And we have a range of those into the U.S. programs in Asia, most notably maybe the Young Southeast Asia Leadership Initiative, which is taking young people, sort of the 18 to 25, late 20s, from all the ASEAN countries and bringing them together in regional conferences and also taking them to the U.S. And just a quick anecdote from a recent trip down south, in the city of Savannakhet down there were 5 alumni of, most of them were YSEALI programs, the acronym for this. A couple who had been UGrad and had done a semester at U.S. University. One of them had developed a mentor. She'd only been at this alumna was only in the States for a couple of months, but developed a mentorship relationship with a professor there and used that experience to come back and set up her own little organization focusing on English training and some vocational training like CVs and resumes and things for young people, particularly single mothers who faced particular strains in finding employment and enhancing employment. Thought up this idea on their own, got a small grant from the embassy to start it off, and has been using that mentorship relationship in the US to keep pushing it forward. Very small example, but I'd agree with a statement made earlier about the speed dial. I think you made it that down, the speed dial. Once that young person experience, kudos to Sonomi for her experience. I was a young person in Thailand a long time ago. You look that way for ideas and inspiration and reaffirmation. And we do have an active program here. We would love to make it more active going forward, both in the university partnerships that Michael talked about. We'll look for more opportunities, and in getting whatever scholarship or brief exchange opportunities we can have for much more engaged Lao youth that are available now. So I wanted to put that in, and glad this question came up.
Yeah, I'm really glad this question. So whenever I've been to 100 countries in my professional career, and whenever I go to a developing country, I always ask, where do you send your most promising students to study abroad? And if they say Beijing, I don't like it. And we shouldn't like it, to be frank. And so my personal view, this is, I'm putting my biases on the table here, but I would prefer not. And so I've been struck by it doesn't have to be the United States, but I think OECD countries, studying abroad in OECD countries in particular is particularly valuable. My personal view is, a little bit to Tanaka-san's point, nothing beats the American experience. Like, I think we've got a lot to offer, especially in higher education. So our high school experiences ain't bad either, but I think, higher education is just one of our superpowers. And so to the extent we can get more university partnerships, it's really important. And I think one of the things for us to think about is we did a report at CSIS, not related to this project, on higher education in the age of great power competition. My view is I'd love to see the various forms of social service delivery, whether it's health or education or other things, that we might imagine kind of building in longer term training, maybe some kind of partnerships, or some of the kind of work or environmental work where it has some kind of a university partnership component to it, as a way to get deepen those ties. It's just so powerful. So, well, look, this has been great. Ambassador, I'm so grateful to you. Michael, thank you for your partnership, AID's partnership. Thank you to the embassy. This is an example of having a great ambassador, having a great AID team. This is a pivotal moment in U.S. Lao relations. Like, we can actually make things happen. We're really proud and grateful that you entrusted us with some work to kind of put some ideas or some meat on the bones and some of the ideas. And this has just been great. Thanks for entrusting us with this work. This has just been tremendous. I'm very hopeful about the U.S. Lao relations, and thank you both for your service, and thank you for the other panelists for being on tonight and this morning.
Thank you so much, Dan, for organizing this and for overseeing this whole enterprise these past months. You've been a great partner.
Thanks, Ambassador. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everybody. Good morning. Good night. Thank you. Bye.
Okay.